Welcome to this morning's webinar on the Operations Manager, Departmental Manager Assessment Plan changes. And this is the first in a series of 3. But before we get started, I just need to check with you that you can actually hear me. So either put your hand up or let us know in the chat or the questions function. And then we will relax and be able to carry on. Right, I'm getting lots of yes, can hear you. That's really good to know. So thank you for that. If you did put your hand up, if you could pop it down now, that would be great. Okay, so thank you for that. You're all on mute today because we've got several hundred of you that have booked onto this webinar, and that might be a bit challenging to if we all started talking at once. So you're all on mute, but this doesn't mean that you can't interact with us. In the right-hand box that you've got, the tab on the side, there is a questions box for you. And whenever we're going through the presentation, if you've got a question that pops into your head, just put it into there. And we are pausing at key points throughout the presentation, and we will respond to any questions. Now, as there are so many of you today, we may not get through all of them, but we do absolutely, and as always, commit to answering those questions if we can't get to them on the day. So we will come back to you. So do use that questions tab function. We are recording this webinar today. So what we will do is, once we have compiled any questions that we didn't answer, we will take the recording, we will take the slide deck, we will take the questions and get those out to you. So that's me for the domestics for this morning. So it would be good to introduce myself. I'm sure my voice is quite familiar to you now. My name is Karen Egan, and I'm the technical advisor for ILM. So let me show you my lovely face. Before lockdown, I have to say, I look more like a scarecrow at the moment with lockdown. You'll see that there's another photograph there. I'm really pleased that we're joined within the team by Jill Hanson, who is also now a technical advisor within the ILM portfolio. She's not on the panel today, however, she's an integral part of this team, and I'm sure you will get to know her over time. So this is a slide that really just nicely captures how we support you across all of the portfolio, but particularly around endpoint assessment. We provide you with guidance on the process, and of course today is very much about that. And when some of my colleagues talk to you, we'll be talking about other guidance documents that we've prepared to help you with that guidance. We hope to prepare you to prepare the learners to pass first time. So again, guidance not just for you, but for your learners to help them so that they are producing their guidance. And webinar 2 will be very much about what is best practice for the new assessment methods. So if you haven't already signed up to that, at the end of this presentation, there'll be a link for you to actually join that. I think there are still some places available. So do come and join us for that. Even if you can't make it, I'm sure, as you know, register. And if you can't make it, we will send the recording to you afterwards. And these last 2 slides are around the dedicated support and the expertise that we have available to you. I'm a specialist in leadership and management and coaching and mentoring. So, you know, I can talk to you about the technical details of the endpoint assessment, and we've got dedicated support around endpoint assessment in particular, and we've got some key people on the programme presentation today that will demonstrate that for you. So hopefully that gives you an overview of where we are at. So what I'm going to just show you is the agenda for today. So we will do introductions as people sort of come online. We're going to give you a bit of background as how we got to today, go through the detail of what's changing, and it is a little bit complex. So hopefully we will be able to share with you those very clear changes, the processes that we have in place and the timelines that we're working to, and the documentation that's available to you. And as I said right at the beginning, we're pausing throughout for some questions as we go along the way. So I'm now going to hand you over to Joe, who will introduce himself and talk through the background.
Thanks,
Hi,
Karen. Hi, can you hear me okay, Karen?
Loud and clear. Sorry, I went on to mute. Loud and clear, yes, yeah.
Wonderful, thank you, Karen. Well, just as an introduction, hopefully you might recognise my voice on some of the webinars recently, but my role, as you can see there, is ILM Industry Manager. So I take responsibility for the ILM portfolio, and I work with a number of stakeholders, including IfATE, which is obviously my particular involvement with this Operations Departmental Manager. So I'm just going to give a little background as to kind of where we've been and where we are now. So I've been working with IfATE and a small group of endpoint assessment organisations to review the assessment plan. And as we did with the team leader, which we launched in the summer, which is also on version 2, this is obviously the next version to launch, which is of course the level 5 Operations Departmental Manager. And I used this same slide when we launched the team leader because very much the background is the same. These reviews are scheduled reviews, and they are very much led by IfATE, because as I'm sure you all know, that IfATE, the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education, are the owners of the apprenticeship standards now. So they lead on reviewing the standards and the assessment plans, and they lead all of the exercises and activities connected to any reviews and consultations. But very much what's been at the heart of these reviews is the drive to ensure that there is more consistency and more comparability across apprenticeship standards and assessment plans. And so what you will see today is very much that consistency and comparability, certainly with the team leader. And for example, we are now going from 5 assessment methods to 2, which is very much the same with the team leader. And that assessment methodology is very much comparable to the team leader. So what you will start to see is a lot more consistency, not only in the assessment plan itself, but you'll see a lot more consistency across endpoint assessment organisations, which is obviously the parts that we play. We are the endpoint assessment organisation, or one of, for this standard. And just to wrap up by saying that IfATE have obviously updated their policies, as with any policy, they are updated, and some of those policy updates have obviously influenced the new assessment plan. But also the other area that has influenced the assessment plan is of course feedback that the Institute receive, both from employers but also from providers. And I'm sure everybody listening to this will have experienced a little bit of pain with the current version of the assessment plan. As with all first versions or first iterations of anything, there are always those teething problems. But the good news is that those teething problems, those issues that were embedded into that version 1, should now have been resolved within the new version. So what you will hear today is essentially that new assessment plan, that new methodology, and a lot more clarity as to kind of how apprentices will be assessed. And we've got a great webinar today that will give you all of that detail and subsequent webinars, as Karen mentioned in the series. So please do attend the full series. You really will benefit from each of the webinars. And on that, I shall hand back over to Karen.
Thanks, Joe. And what I'm going to do is launch a poll question, really, because what struck me when you said IfATE, I was like, okay, if we've got some people who are new to EPA, they might just be thinking, what does that stand for? So I'm going to launch a poll question. I can never see these, so I'm going to rely on Joe to tell me whether they've whether you can see it on the screen. That's fine.
Yeah, the poll question is there, so you should be able to see, how would you describe your current situation with the Operations Departmental Manager Endpoint Assessment, is the question. And you have three options.
Good. That means I've launched the correct question, Joe. That's really good. So how are they going? Are they settling?
I'd give it a little bit more, still collecting responses.
Okay.
So about 75% of those, that's going up now, still going up.
Come on, guys, this is a check to see whether that you're engaging with us as well. It's not a trick question, it's just for us to sort of understand the audience that we've got, really.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is still going up. People are still answering. We're at 86%.
Okay.
That's great.
I'm going to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm closing it. Okay, so the results, to be transparent.
Yeah, they are there. We can see them.
I can't, Joe, so could you share them?
I shall indeed. So the great news that 60% of you listening are currently working with ILM and using ILM as an endpoint assessment organisation. 18% of you are saying we currently offer this endpoint assessment through another endpoint assessment organisation. And then 14% of you haven't offered endpoint assessment yet.
Okay, so we've got some existing customers for this standard, some people who are sort of interested in what we have to offer, and people who are new. So so that's a good mixture there. Thank you, Joe. So what I'm going to start going into now is the detail of what's changed. So if you're new to this standard, what the current assessment plan is may not be as familiar to you as others, but at the moment there is a test for the endpoint assessment, but that disappears. As Joe said right at the beginning, the assessment methods go down from 5 to 2 in this in this new assessment plan. There are some other bits that need to still be included but are not assessed. So you know, let's just work through those. So there is still a requirement for a portfolio. As those of you who are involved with this will know, that that is assessed currently, and there are a whole host of challenges that sit around that. You know, we've all felt the pain of those. So in the future, in this new assessment plan, it will not be assessed. However, that doesn't mean you just chuck in something, you know, fairly you know, inconsequential, because it needs to be robust because it underpins the professional discussion. So I know that when we launched this with Team Leader, there was lots of hoorays going around the country, but you know, it still needs to be robust. So obviously you need to submit the portfolio currently, but it's not part of the gateway process. It's submitted 2 weeks before the face-to-face endpoint assessment. And by face-to-face, I don't mean in 3D person. Our normal process is for those to be virtual interactions, and ever more so at the moment with the current situations. However, the requirement for the new assessment plan is that it is submitted at gateway. Okay, so previously, and this is, I guess, part of the challenges with the portfolio, there was no guidance from the assessment plan, and the assessment plan is written and published, obviously with support from the employer group. And as Joe was saying, we were very much part of the employer group for this new assessment plan. There was no guidance on the number of pieces of evidence, and with this new assessment plan, there is a guidance on 20 pieces of evidence. Okay. So professional discussion did exist for CPD in the current assessment plan. However, this is a much more significant part of the overall assessment plan now, and it is underpinned by the portfolio of evidence and counts for 50% of the marks. Now, what I need to stress here is that the scoring is totally dependent on what happens at the professional discussion. So unless, it doesn't matter how brilliant the portfolio is, unless the learner actually includes what's in that portfolio as part of the discussion, the IEPA can't score it. So the interview and question and answer disappears. So that is present in the current one and disappears. And then the presentation and Q&A does exist now and will continue to, but it is based on a project proposal. And this is quite a key change, because it's not based on a project that the learner has undertaken during their on programme. It's a project proposal that occurs post gateway. So that is quite a significant change. You'll see in these slides, I've got a link at the bottom that will take you direct. I won't do it now because I'm hopeless at IT and I'll never get back to the presentation, but it will take you to the assessment plan on the IfATE website. So just continuing now, we've got the grading. Currently it's fail, pass, merit and distinction. As with all new assessment plans from IfATE, the merit is disappearing. Okay, so that's not just specific to this standard or management standards, it's across the board. IfATE have made the decision that the merit will not exist. There is an option to resit as always, and currently you could still achieve a distinction at a resit. However, the IfATE have said no, that if this is a resit, then the best that the learner can achieve is a pass. Okay. The grading criteria is also changing quite significantly. The criteria with the current assessment plan is that as long as 50% of the criteria is met, then that is a pass. Okay. So, you know, it doesn't matter if some of them just weren't achieved at all. However, that's now changing to all of the pass descriptors. So 100% of the pass descriptors need to be met to achieve a pass. Okay. There was no distinction criteria in the current one, but there is in the new assessment plan. So there's very clear guidance on what needs to happen to achieve a distinction. However, again, all of the distinction criteria need to be met, or the descriptors, sorry, let me use the correct term. So again, if they achieve most of the distinction descriptors, but not all of them, the overall grade will be a pass. And the grading descriptors are grouped together, so it's not assessed in a linear fashion. It's in a much more holistic way, and is a more qualitative focus rather than quantitative. I always struggle with how many T's there are in quantitative. Okay. And then from our feedback, you know, what we've done in the past is only sort of identify where the learner has failed. However, what we plan to do with the new assessment plan is to show the gradings across all of the descriptors. So where the learner has passed, where they've gained a distinction, and obviously where they have failed, just to help to see where the learners have done really well and where they need to make some amendments. So I'm very conscious that we have just thrown an awful lot of information at you there. So I'm going to pass back to Joe to see if we have any questions that have come through.
We certainly have some great questions. So we'll just rattle through some of the first ones. So the first one is, will the exiting, so the current or the old, as let's call it, be retired immediately, or will it remain open for registered learners, or will all learners move to the new assessment plan?
Okay, so the new assessment plan was published by IfATE, so that's the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education, on the 21st of October. So any learner that started on or after the 21st of October, so started their apprenticeship, not their endpoint assessment, then they will do this new assessment plan. Okay. Any learner who started their apprenticeship journey prior to the 21st of October can either continue for the current one, or they can switch to the new one. And Maurice will talk about the options to switch a bit later on. So the current assessment plan from ILM will remain open until we feel that all of those learners that started their journey as late as the 20th of October this year have gone through the whole process. Hopefully that answers the question.
Great, thanks, Karen. Okay, so we've got a number of questions about pieces of evidence. I'll try and just ask one question that will capture everyone's question around pieces of evidence. But and I know that this is going to come out in more detail as the webinar goes on. But Karen, I don't know if you want to touch on, you know, giving a definition of you know, a piece of evidence.
A piece of evidence.
Another thing that picks up on the 20.
Okay, so so a piece of evidence is, in my mind, and I've talked to a lot of our assessors as well, the independent endpoint assessors, we would expect the portfolio to consist of some holistic pieces of evidence. So let me give my colleague's going to drop off to sleep now because I'm going to use my example that I always use, is the team leader or the ops manager who is chairing a meeting. So so they would provide a series of pieces of evidence that demonstrates how effective they were in chairing that meeting, and that would possibly consist of a brief recording of the certain parts of the meeting, a witness testimony, from someone who was at the meeting to show how effective they were, the agenda and the notes or action points from the meeting. So what I've listed there is 4 pieces of documents, if you like, that would bundle together to form one piece of evidence. However, what we would expect that piece of evidence to do would be to map across quite a significant number of the criteria for the assessment plan. Okay, so definitely that would come into communication and leading people and managing people. So make sure that those pieces of evidence are holistic, and we would not expect to see 20 documents within one piece of evidence. You only need to hit the evidence once. So the acid test for me is, if you were to take a document out of your bundle, would that, what was left, still meet the criteria? And if it would, leave it out, because we will be rejecting portfolios, and we are now, if they are excessive.
Great, thank you, Karen. That's very clear. So I think one more question which has come up a few times. So one question is CPD still included in the PD alongside the underpinning evidence?
It's within the, so there's the self-reflection and self-assessment side of things in there, so that's where it would be picked up within the on programme.
And just to add to that, in the current version, the specific CPD attached to the professional discussion. So the professional discussion in the new version covers a lot more of a greater breadth of the KSBs, which now have grading criteria. So the PD covers a lot more, and we're going to go into more detail about that a little bit.
Absolutely, it does, and it's actually 50% of the overall score. And actually, Juicy is, I'm going to hand over to Juicy now. I'm just conscious of time, Joe. Are there any other pertinent questions relating to what's okay? So I'm going to hand over.
Yeah,
sorry, Joe.
I think we can definitely pick them up at the next pause, for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to hand over to Juicy, because actually that question is really key, and I'm sure will be answered fully when Juicy takes over. So I'm going to hand you over to the lovely Juicy Poliseno, who is our development manager. Hi, Juicy.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Karen, can you confirm that you can hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear, sorry, I was on mute there, sorry. I can hear you perfectly. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so my name is Juicy Poliseno, and I'm the development manager looking after ILM endpoint assessment, in particular level 3 and level 5. So I would like to tell you a bit more now about how the endpoint assessment is changing for this apprenticeship as a result of the changes to the new assessment plan that has recently been published in October. So the first assessment method I would like to talk about is the professional discussion underpinned by a portfolio of evidence, which goes by the reference number 9309, 705 for the first sitting, and 755 in case there is a need for a resit or retake. The knowledge, skills and behaviours within the standard have been distributed into different groups, and each assessment method within this endpoint assessment will assess different KSB groups. So the KSB groups assessed within the professional discussion are the following: operational planning and management, managing teams, communication skills, personal and professional development. Now, there are some requirements about the portfolio, which I still want to emphasize, as Karen said already, it still represent an important part of the endpoint assessment. There are some requirements for this portfolio which are actually listed in the assessment plan. So first of all, the portfolio, a completed portfolio of evidence must be submitted at Gateway. The portfolio is not directly assessed, but it rather underpins the professional discussion. So the IEPA, the independent endpoint assessor, will use the content of the portfolio that will be reviewed once submitted to prepare the questions, the areas that will need to be discussed. So the IEPA will tailor the questions and the area of discussion based on the content seen within the portfolio. So the portfolio does inform the professional discussion. And it's very important that the apprentice is familiar with the content. And during the EPA day, so during the actual professional discussion, both the IEPA and the apprentice can have the portfolio with them so that they can refer to it if they wish. Another requirement is that the portfolio of evidence must be accompanied by a portfolio of evidence matrix, so a mapping document that clearly shows how the evidence is mapped against the relevant knowledge, skills, and behaviors that are assessed by the professional discussion. Another requirement, which is not it's not new now, it comes from the Institute for Apprenticeship and Technical Education, where now the guidance is that a reflective account or any method of self-assessment is not considered a valid piece of evidence that can be included in a portfolio. So this is the same for this standard, with the exception of skill 8.1, which the module is self-awareness, able to reflect on own performance, working style, and its impact on others. So this is the exception where actually a self-assessment of a reflective account will be accepted for skill 8.1. One other requirement, again listed from the assessment plan, is that we would expect at least one piece of evidence relating to each knowledge, skills, and behavior mapped to this assessment method. We would obviously expect evidence, each piece of evidence, to cover more than one knowledge, skills, and behavior, to be as holistic as possible in its nature, to cover a variety and number of knowledge, skills, and behaviors, and to represent the best piece of evidence. And this is really related to the restriction that we have in terms of the size and amount of evidence accepted within the portfolio, where the recommendation from the assessment plan is that it should typically contain 20 pieces of evidence. Okay, if we can now talk about the project proposal, presentation, and questioning, which is the next assessment method, which goes by the reference 9309, 704 for the first sitting, and 754 in case of a resit of a retake is needed. So this assessment component is made up of two components. So we have the project proposal, which is carried out post-gateway, so it's post-gateway work. And then we have the presentation and questioning. And these two pieces of evidence, so the project proposal and the presentation with questioning, are assessed holistically together. So they all contribute together to the grading. In terms of the KSB, the knowledge, skills and behavior groups assessed by the project proposal presentation with questioning, we have the planning of their project proposal, delivery of their project proposal, and then the project proposal output. So in terms of the scope subject of this project proposal, it could be related, for instance, to the need for a review and implementation of a change plan to improve efficiency in the workplace. It could be about continuous improvement review of a current process or a service or a product to ensure that it still meets the needs of the business and it does fit for purpose. Or it could be about the implementation of a direct saving across a team, a department, or organization following a reforecast activity. It's important to note that this is not a definitive list, and I will tell you in a minute about the content, the title, subject, and scope of this project proposal. So if we can go to the next slide. So the project proposal subject, title and scope, it will really need to be agreed between the employer and us at the gateway. And how it's going to work? So basically, there is a requirement of a brief summary that must be submitted at gateway. We will provide you with a template, which will be available in the recording forms pack. This template will need to be used to detail how the project will provide sufficient opportunity for the apprentice to cover the KSBs that are mapped to this method. Now, the brief summary is not assessed and it shouldn't be more than 500 words. The brief summary needs to demonstrate how the project proposal will meet the needs of the business. It must be relevant to the apprentice role and allow the relevant KSB to be assessed for endpoint assessment. So this project proposal must represent a real business need. As I mentioned, the brief summary is not assessed. However, the IEPA, the independent endpoint assessor, will review the summary and decide whether to reject it or accept it. Once it is accepted, the apprentice will have a total of 12 weeks to write and submit the proposal, together with a presentation, which I will tell you a bit more in a moment. So in terms of the project proposal itself, the project proposal will need to be a detailed project implementation proposal that will enable the project to be fully implemented. And I use the future tense, will enable the project to be fully implemented. The reason is because the project doesn't need to be fully implemented during the EPA period. However, the implementation of the project must be begin during the EPA period. And this was really stressed by the Trailblazer group when they were working together to write the assessment plan. It was really important that the project proposal will start at EPA. In particular, for certain skills, which are S1.2, S2.1, S2.2, and 3.1, which are about the support, management, and communication of change, and the identification of barriers and how to overcome them, the planning, the organization, the management of the resources to deliver the required outcomes, the monitoring of the progress and the identification of the risk and any mitigation, and then the monitoring of the budget and the provision of reports to consider the financial implication of the decision and how to adjust the approach and the recommendation accordingly. So these listed skills must be implemented during the EPA post-gateway. Now, there are some specifications about this project proposal document. Again, they are listed in the assessment plan. So to start with, it's 4,000 words, plus minus 10%, which is at the apprentice discretion. These 4,000 words, it includes tables, graphs, and figures, and it does exclude the references and any annexes which are outside the 4,000 words. Now, there is a specific structure and content, indicative content, that must be covered by the project proposal, which is detailed in the assessment plan. Next week, we're going to have a webinar, and I will tell you a bit more about the content of the proposal. In the meanwhile, if you are desperate to know, then you can have a look on the assessment plan, and you will see the content, the listed content for the project proposal. One other requirement is the project proposal must be accompanied by a mapping document to show how the project proposal maps to the knowledge, skills, and behavior that are assessed by this method. It's what we call the project proposal evidence matrix. And last, it must be submitted after 12 weeks from the time the brief summary has been accepted, together with the presentation. And now I will tell you more in the next slide about the presentation itself. So the presentation, as I just mentioned, it must be submitted at the same time as the project proposal. The focus of the presentation, it's really on the project implementation proposal itself, and cover the knowledge, skills, and behavior that are mapped to this method. Again, there is a specific content that is detailed in the assessment plan. So there are some themes that are expected to be covered in the presentation. And really, they are the modules within the standards. So the apprentice will have 2 weeks ahead of the presentation to allow the apprentice themselves to prepare in terms of the content of the project and the presentation that they will need to be delivered. And at the same time, our independent endpoint assessor will have a 2 weeks time to review both the proposal, the project proposal, implementation, and the presentation document, and prepare appropriate questions. So we do have a number of question banks that will be available for their EPers, and they will be tailored, obviously depending on the content of the project and the presentation itself. In terms of a number of questions that will be asked during the questioning, so straight after the presentation, there is a minimum of 9 questions that will be asked, and each of them will be from the themes, again, that are listed from the assessment plan. In terms of the purpose of the questions, is really for clarification on the proposal and the presentation, and to assess the depth and breadth of the knowledge, skills, and behaviors, and to assess the KSP that are that the apprentice did not have perhaps the opportunity to demonstrate with the proposal. So in terms of the length of the presentation, so we have 60 minutes in total, where there are 20 minutes for the presentation and 40 minutes for questioning. again, there is that 10% where the independent endpoint assessor has the discretion to increase the time of the presentation and questioning by up to 10% to allow the apprentice to complete their last answer. So we said 20 minutes for the presentation and 40 minutes for the questioning. And the discretionary additional 10% time can be allocated in any proportion across the presentation and questioning. Now, we would expect, outside of the 9 questions, that there will be, we believe there will be follow-up questions that will be required for clarification, and there will be questions about the project proposal itself and the presentation. Now, I think while I was delivering the presentation, I don't know if perhaps I've forgotten to tell you about the length of the professional discussion and how many questions are asked. So we have 6 questions that will be asked. And again, it's likely that more questions will be required for follow-up, and is a total of 60 minutes. Apologies, I think I've forgotten to mention it when I was talking about the professional discussion. So I appreciate there is quite a lot to absorb in terms of these 2 assessment methods, particularly for the presentation, the project proposal presentation and questioning, which perhaps is the one a bit more complicated because there are different components within it. So I will pause now for questions, if we have any questions, perhaps, Joe, related to the assessment components themselves.
Hi, Juicy. Yes, we do. We have a good number of questions. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to start from the bottom and work back up. Okay, so lots more questions coming through. So let me try and pinpoint. Okay, so this is a good question that we can start off with. Can apprentices still write case studies, or are they classed as reflective accounts?
No, case studies. We did actually query case studies with Open Awards at the time. We did it for team leader, and Open Awards has confirmed that case studies is not something that unfortunately is acceptable for endpoint assessment. And in particular for this standard, we will need to have apprentices who will be able to demonstrate all the knowledge, skills and behaviors that are mapped to these assessment methods, as well obviously as the grading descriptor. So it's very important to pay attention to the grading descriptors, which is a good thing. We do have grading descriptors with expectation of how are we measuring the pass and distinction against each of the knowledge, skills and behavior groups, but not case studies. Every apprentice will need to have opportunity to have an exposure to all the knowledge, skills and behaviors within this standard.
I wonder if it's worth me adding to that. We had our newsletter out in October, and I did a spotlight piece on that, Joe, if you recall, yes. Around, because we do understand that, you know, maybe in big organisations, particularly in the public sector and the NHS, where around budgets, you know, maybe people at this level that are not budget holders, but IfATE through Open Awards did push this back very strongly to us to say, well, okay, if they're not a budget holder, they can ghost manage a budget, you know, but they need to have experienced and can evidence that they have done it. So we were advised very clearly there that a case study is not acceptable.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, both Juicy and Karen. Okay, so another question that I think is worth answering at this point. So the question is, can the professional discussion be completed at any point after Gateway, or will the presentation and PD happen at the same time?
There is no order within the assessment plan. So the apprentices can do the professional discussion first and then move to the project proposal presentation, or do the opposite, start with the project proposal presentation and move to the professional discussion. So that it's up to the customer, really. In terms of the project proposal presentation, because from the time the brief summary is accepted, as I said, the brief summary needs to be submitted at Gateway, and then the IEPA will need to have time to review it and decide whether accept it or reject it. And from that point onwards, the apprentice will have 12 weeks to write the documentation, the proposal and the presentation, and submit it. And then they will need to have 2 weeks notice ahead of the EPA event. Potentially the professional discussion could happen before, a few weeks before, but I know sometimes, well, ideally during the EPA event, these two assessment methods, they tend to take place at the same time. So ideally it will be on the same day, but there isn't really any restriction in the assessment plan itself to actually dictate which one needs to happen first.
Great, thank you, Judy. And I've got a kind of a closed question here. Is there a template, or will there be a template for the project proposal?
For the project proposal itself, we decided not to have a template, because when I was working with the independent endpoint assessor, for both the proposal and the presentation, we wanted to leave flexibility for the apprentices to decide at this level actually how they want to structure it. So the only guidance that the apprentice needs to be to adhere to is in terms of content. In terms of the content that must be laid out and covered in the portfolio, and then the content that needs to be covered within the presentation. So we don't have a template because we wanted to leave it to the apprentice to make their own decision in how they prefer to devise their documentation at this level.
Great, thank you, Juicy. That's a really good answer.
Sorry, Joe. Can I just say, although I would be interested to know, if some customer feel that they really will benefit from a template, if they want to let us know, this is something perhaps that we can look into. However, in terms of content, we wouldn't be able, we can put some headings, but we wouldn't be able to more than that, because the headings are the listed content that are within the assessment plan, and how you order it, it will be to the apprentice. But I will be open for a discussion if customers think that actually they would like to have a template. So I will be interested to know.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Juicy, because we will be looking at producing exemplar materials that aren't necessarily templates. But as Juicy said, do let us know in your comments whether you think a template would be beneficial, or whether you think, as Juicy has said, that actually allowing the apprentice to make that decision, but giving them really clear guidance as to what is required of that project proposal is sufficient or not. So do let us know in the comments. Karen, how are we doing for time?
It's always tight, Joe, you know it is. And just to add to that, within the assessment plan, it very clearly sets out what needs to be covered, and it does sort of include things like an executive summary, you know, etc. So, you know, that probably lends itself within the assessment plan to the structure that the apprentice will tend to put forward. So yeah, it's worth. There are lots of links in this presentation directly to the assessment plan. So go and have a look, and you'll be able to see it. Probably structures it for you within the assessment plan to an extent. But as Juicy said, the order is entirely up to you.
Yeah.
So have you got one more question? Do you think that? I'm sure you've got more than one, but shall we go for one more?
I was going to say we've got quite a lot, quite good number of questions, and just to repeat what you mentioned at the start, Karen, that if we don't get through them all, we will commit to producing FAQs. So please don't feel we're ignoring any of the questions that we do have a lot.
If we do one more, and then once we've finished the formal bit of the presentation, we will then just go right up to 11 and respond to any questions that are coming through. And if we still haven't done them all, we'll do them as you say afterwards. Is that okay?
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so I think I've got a good question here because it connects back to the level 3 team leader. So the question is the project title not given by the endpoint assessment organization after Gateway, like the new team leader supervisor? So that's a good clarification question, I think, there, Juicy.
Yeah, I can answer that. So actually, they work in completely different way. So in the level 3 team leader new assessment plan, we give the title the apprentice. While in this level 5 endpoint assessment, we actually do the opposite. So it's actually the apprentice that will come forward with a brief summary of what they intend to base their project proposal implementation on. And then we will decide, looking at the content, very briefly is 500 words. And as I said, there is a template that will tell you actually the details that you will need to include. We will decide whether the scope of it will allow the map KSB and grading descriptor to be covered. So we can potentially reject it if we are not sure that actually the scope will allow the apprentice to cover the map KSB. So it will be rejecting it. It will be almost like a way to support the apprentice, to actually asking the apprentice to review the brief summary. And obviously you will receive some feedback. We're not just going to say we are rejecting, but we will explain the reason, or perhaps if we need more information. So potentially the apprentice will need either to review the brief summary and include more information so that we can come to a decision whether to accept or not, or perhaps think about another step for their project proposal. So yes, well spotted. They do work in the opposite way, the level 3 and the level 5.
Wonderful, thank you, Juicy. And I think we're handing back over to Karen now.
Well, only very briefly to introduce you to Maurice, who is one of our endpoint assessment partnership managers. Hi, Maurice.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great, brilliant, thank you. So if we could just, my name's Maurice Hole, and I am one of the endpoint assessment partnership managers for City and Guilds and ILM. I'm going to take you through the registration process for existing registrations or new registrations. So I'm firstly going to look at if you have already made a registration with ILM under the current endpoint assessment, you can continue as you've registered and complete through that journey of that endpoint assessment for that apprentice. So you wouldn't need to change anything on that process of switching or booking. So that is your first option. The second option is that you are able to switch between the current and the new endpoint assessment, and I'll give you some details on how you do that. If you haven't registered with ILM yet for your endpoint assessment, you can register on the current 9309-12 for the endpoint assessment, or you can register from the 15th of January onto the new endpoint assessment, which is 9309-22. But it's really important to be aware that any learners who have commenced their apprenticeship on or after the 21st of October must adopt the new assessment plan. I could have the next slide, please, Karen. So where you've already made a registration and you're looking to switch to the new assessment plan, from the 15th of January, you're able to do this. And what you'll need to do is email the EPA inbox, so that is epa@cityandguilds.com. And the subject title of your email will just need to be clear, stating that it's the Operations Departmental Manager, Level 5, version 1 to version 2 switch, very similar to what we did with the team leader. So you'll just need to put in the body of your email the learners that you wish to switch and their enrolment number, and when you would like the endpoint assessment to take place. So another important point just to make clear here is if they've already started their endpoint assessment on the current assessment plan, you won't be able to switch. They will have to continue on the current assessment plan. Next slide, please, Karen. Oh, that's it. Thank you very much. So when you're registering your apprentice, so you will start through Walled Garden, you'll register your apprentice, and this is where you pay your £25 registration fee. And that opens up all the resources that Juicy is going to go through a little bit later to help support you with the resource documents. You will then book through Walled Garden, selecting your date, and we'll go through a timeline a little bit later as well. You will upload your evidence to the EPA portal, all your mandatory evidence that's required, and then you will set and agree a date with the booking team. You will then complete all the components of your endpoint assessment, and the results will be released into Walled Garden 20 working days after the final element of the endpoint assessment. If we could go on to the next slide, please, Karen. We are introducing EPA Pro, so this is a simplified process, and it really smooths, quickens and makes things a lot smoother for you. So the complete EPA journey will be in one platform. It will simplify the workflow, so there's less back and forth, there's less platforms, and it will make it easier for you. So this is all happening in the first quarter of next year. You will get closer to the IEPAs, the independent endpoint assessors, for booking your events, and you will also have more clarity around the gateway requirements. The process is easier for uploading gateway and assessment evidence, and it's a lot more visible for you to see the stages and progress of the apprentices or your cohorts. There is a better reporting capability on there as well for you, and there's quicker access to results. So you will see the results 7 days after each element has been completed, and they will come through to EPA Pro for you, which means that you can celebrate success with your apprentices quicker. Next slide, please, Karen. So this is our EPA partnership managers. So there's myself in the Southwest, there's Janice Collins in the North, and Rebecca Hollenby in the Midlands. So our details are on there. We're there to support you. So please take our details down, contact us at any point, and we can help support you with any of your endpoint assessment needs. Thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you, Maurice. And any questions coming through for that section, Joe?
Let me have a look. Okay, so I've got a question here. I do use EPA Pro. I normally register learners on there. Is this something that you will be doing, or will we need to still register on Walled Garden?
So if you're already using EPA Pro, you will go into EPA Pro as you do with your other standards and book as normal through Pro with your EPA Pro process. Lots of pros there, but yeah, you will use EPA Pro.
Wonderful, thank you, Maurice. And a good question here. How about the southeast? Is this covered by the southwest?
Yes, is the answer. Yeah, between us all, between all of us, we cover the country.
Yeah, wonderful. So if you're in the south, then Maurice is always definitely a good point of contact, I think. Okay, so how, I think there's a hello there. So we registered a learner for EPA early November on 9309-12. Will this still be accepted? So this is a registration in November onto the current version. So will this still be accepted?
Yes, so you can continue with your current registration. You don't need to make any changes if you're planning to stay on the current version. It's only where apprentices have started their actual apprenticeship with that October date that you will have to go to version 2, to the new version. So you can continue as normal if you've made your registration for your endpoint assessment in November.
Just adding to that, yes, we're open for new registrations for both version 1 and version 2 throughout. So, you know, we may have a learner that started on the 20th of October on their apprenticeship. You may not wish to register them yet for EPA. So, and this is quite a lengthy standard. It's, you know, it's sort of 2 years plus. So yeah, we'll be still accepting new registrations for version 1 until there are no more.
Correct. And that's a really good point, actually, Karen. So version 1 and version 2 will remain open. But just to echo your earlier point as well, Karen, that obviously all apprentices registered onto their ILR from the 21st of October onwards should be registered onto version 2.
Yes, and that's not our stipulation, that's IfATE's requirement.
That's it, absolutely. Okay, so so there's a question around fees for switching, Marie. So are there any fees involved if providers want to switch from version 1 to version 2?
No, there aren't. We will do the switches in the background for you. When you send that email, the team will change the versions, but there's no costs involved for that.
Great, thank you very much. I'm sure that will be great news for everybody. Okay, so question here, we are still not on EPA Pro. When will we get notification of switching over to EPA Pro?
So we're working in waves going over to EPA Pro. So everybody will go on to EPA Pro by the end of February. So depending on the wave that you will be switched over, the onboarding team will come out to you around 8 weeks before you're due to go live to work on that process with you.
Great, thank you, Maurice. Okay, there's a good question here from Chris. I think some clarification. There's just comments about that the October date doesn't seem fair for apprentices who are expecting version 1. I know they will ask guidance why it wasn't provided before the change. So, I think I can probably just talk about that. So obviously the date in October, so the 21st, that's only relevant for those who are new apprentices. So they're starting their apprenticeship and you're registering those apprentices on ILR. And so therefore they will be doing their apprenticeship for obviously the next 24 months and therefore won't reach EPA for another 2 years. So it's only for those learners. Obviously, if they're already on program and we're expecting the current version, then they most definitely can and will stay on the current version. So it's only for those learners who are starting their apprenticeship from the 21st of October and therefore won't hit endpoint assessment for another 2 years, will they have to. So essentially, you've got that 2-year period to ensure that they are. And it's only if you choose to switch, obviously, the key thing is that you only switch learners to the new version if you and the employer and the apprentice feel that it won't disadvantage them. And obviously, if you think it would, then you keep to version 1, unless obviously they're starting their apprenticeship and you're registering them on the ILR from the 21st of October onwards. So Karen, Juicy or Maurice, I don't know if you want to add to that or not.
I think you're absolutely right, Joe, and I think we've had some instances that Maurice and I in particular have worked on where there's been a decision to move from in the team leader one to the new assessment plan, and it's caused some significant challenges for the learner in particular. And of course, you know, that we have to bear in mind that it's all about the learner. And there was a blanket decision made by the centre to move everything to the new one, and some learners were very close to their endpoint assessment, and it did cause some significant challenge. So, you know, it has to be that agreement between the learner, the employer and the centre that it's the right decision. But yeah, learners that are just starting out, so started out from the 21st of October, you know, centres can be preparing them for those 2 years plus for the new assessment method, and we have no control over that date. We sit there scanning the website for when it's published. That's the first that we know about it. We don't hear until the day. So you know, it's a date that we just sit and wait for. So apologies that we don't have any control over that.
Yeah, thank you, Karen, and I can thank you, Chris, for answering that question. I can see from your comments that you still got some kind of concerns around that. So please do get in contact with us, and we will support you as best we can. Now, I can see, thank you there, Chris. I can see that you understand that this is an IfATE decision, not an ILM decision. So
and just to bear in mind that none of the knowledge, skills and behaviours have changed. So the on-programme learning is I was going to say the same, but you'll need to sort of think that through about having the end in mind right from the beginning. So understanding clearly what the EPA process will be and how the knowledge, skills and behaviours are shaped in the endpoint assessment. But what you will need to teach them and the skills that you'll need to develop with them have not changed.
Yes, and that's a really important point. The standard hasn't changed. It's just the assessment methodology. And I say just, it's a big point. Okay, so I think there's just one more question. Are we okay for one more?
Yeah, if we're quick.
Okay, so the question is, can you please confirm EPA timescales now 130 days from gateway to certification, assuming all goes well?
Okay, that's probably my next slide, Joe. So
I've lined it up nicely for you, Karen.
Okay. So they're preempting my next slide. So I've got another poll question. So can I quickly do that poll question, and then I'll move on to the slide that I've got for the timelines. So tell me, Joe, when you can see it.
Yeah, I can see that. So it says, when will you switch, or when do you plan to switch to the new assessment plan for the Operations Departmental Manager endpoint assessment? And the options are straight away, including apprentices already registered, straight away for new apprentices not yet registered, I will wait a while, I need time to prepare, and then the final option is I don't deliver this standard at the moment.
Yeah. And this is just to help us to gear our team up, really. You know, our IEPAs need to be juggling both the new and the current one, and our bookings team as well. So it just helps us know where the pressure points might be. How are we doing? I think well,
we're up to 67%.
Okay.
So the numbers are still coming in. The last few.
And don't worry, guys, we're not going to hold you to this. If you try and switch someone and you said that you're not going to do it, we're not going to ban you from doing that. This is just to give us a guide.
Absolutely. Well, we've been at 69% for a while, so
Okay. Okay, I'm just going to share the results then.
Okay, so probably what we expected. So we've got 13% of you will switch straight away for those apprentices already registered. 51% of you, so 50% or half of you will switch straight away for new apprentices not yet registered. And then 31% of you have said, I will wait a while, you need time to prepare. 5% obviously don't deliver.
Yeah, that's fine. And whatever your thoughts there, we're here to support you through that whole process. So thank you for that. Has that disappeared off the screen now?
No, it's still there. I can still see it.
Oh, okay. What can you see now?
I can still see the results.
What? Oh dear. Okay, Joe, what can you see on the screen now?
So for me, I can still see the results. Maurice, can you still see them, or is it just me?
Yeah, I can't see the slide. I can still see the results.
I wonder why it's not.
Okay, let me see. Okay, we're back to the holding screen. So I think if you share again, Karen, then it should come back up.
Yes.
The wonders of technology.
There
We're
it
back.
is.
Here we go.
Okay, so you can see my lovely squiggly line, can you?
We can. That's it.
Okay, that's excellent. Okay, so thank you for bearing with me on that. So I think this is a question that was asked really right at that you flagged previously, Joe. So this is the timeline for endpoint assessment for the new assessment plan. So at Gateway, there needs to be, obviously there's still the functional skills or level 2 English and maths that needs to be submitted, but there also needs to be the portfolio that underpins the professional discussion and the project proposal that Juicy explored with you earlier. So that needs to be submitted into, that says EPA Pre, that should say EPA Pro, and that should be submitted at Gateway. Okay, so once you've gone through Gateway, we will check the portfolio for completeness and agree the project proposal. So just to clarify, we will confirm, yes, we've got all the information that we need to put you through Gateway. That does not mean at that stage that we have agreed that the portfolio is complete and not excessive. And it doesn't mean that we've reviewed the project proposal at that stage. But within, I think we've got a service level agreement of 3 days there for the checking that project and the portfolio. Okay, so as Juicy said, once we have agreed the project proposal, the apprentice has 12 weeks to prepare the project implementation plan, to actually start the implementation of the project, and to produce the presentation. Okay, so it's very important. This is not just a proposal. They have to commence that implementation, and that implementation must be post gateway. Okay. So the project implementation plan and the presentation are submitted after 12 weeks. And then the IEPA, the Independent Endpoint Assessor, prepares for the EPA event, and they have 2 weeks for that. And then the EPA takes place after that. Okay, so hopefully that's fairly clear, and it is so different to you know, the current one. So we just wanted to make sure that that was clearly defined. I think I'm handing over to Juicy now.
Thank you, Karen. Can I just add something quickly about the brief summary? To say that it's actually 5 days. It's been recently changed, so within 5 days you will hear back whether the brief summary on the project proposal has been accepted. In the past it was 3 days, it's been now extended to 5 days.
Thanks, Juicy. What I'll do is I'll put that onto this slide before I send it through. So thank you for clarifying that, Juicy.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the gateway, what you submit, we call it brief summary. So it's the brief summary and the portfolio. And then if it's accepted, then you will start to work on your project proposal for clarity. But yes, we can move to the next slide. So really, in terms of the next slide, I just wanted to quickly let you know the documents that will be available as part of the endpoint assessment. I don't actually see the slide yet.
Oh, okay. It's on my screen. How about you, Joe?
I'm still on the timeline, Karen.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing.
Oh,
okay.
Now I can see it.
We got it. Thank you,
Okay.
Karen.
It's,
so there are 3 key documents. So we have the endpoint assessment pack for centers, endpoint assessment customers. We got the recording forms, and we got the mapping document for the level 5 diploma for leaders and managers. So in terms of content, pretty much the same as what you will see if you were offering the team leader through ILM. So in the center pack, you will find the standard, the resources required to run EPA, the timeline in details, talks about the employer, the training providers, the apprentice, and the IEPA. And then we have the EPA guidance on grading and specific guidance for the customers and the apprentice on both components. Then in the appendix, you will find the knowledge, skills, and behaviors that are mapped to each assessment component. And finally, you will find the project proposal presentation with questioning, mapping reference for feedback, as well as one for the professional discussion underpinned by a portfolio of evidence, which will help you to link the feedback for any fail, for any apprentices who would have failed, unfortunately, the way the IEPA will structure the feedback. So you will have this mapping document to help you to understand the feedback and how to support the customers, sorry, the apprentice for the first sitting, but for the next sitting, and whether any additional learning will be required. In terms of the recording forms pack, what you will find in it, as I mentioned before, you will send a brief summary with for the project proposal, and we have provided you with a template and the structure that you will need to follow, with signature for the apprentice, employer, and training providers, and there will be then a section for the IEPer that will comment on the suitability of the project. You will find a declaration of authentication, one for the project proposal and presentation, and one for the portfolio of evidence. In addition, there will be a matrix, one for the portfolio of evidence and one for the project proposal and presentation as per the requirement of the assessment plan. And finally, a mapping document for the level 5 diploma for leaders and managers, which is the 8420-01, which has been designed to assist you in putting together a portfolio of evidence by selecting the relevant examples of the apprentice work from the on-program activities to efficiently demonstrate knowledge, skills and behaviors that the apprentices have learned and applied during their apprenticeship program. So these documents will be available on the 15th of January when we will launch this product, this endpoint assessment officially for registrations. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Juicy. That's sort of the end of our formal presentation. We've got a couple of slides which I'll show you here, which are around next steps and how you can get in touch with us, which will come out to you with the presentation. But we have got 3 minutes, Joe. So any pertinent questions that are coming through that we could cover in the last 3 minutes?
Well, let's have a look. So we've got thanks. So I think actually probably a couple of questions that I've seen come through might be worth just touching on, which we've not really touched on, but the kind of relationship with our diploma. So the level 5 diploma for leaders and managers. So there's one question here. Does the diploma mapping document help with keeping within the 20 pieces limit? So Juicy, I know we were talking about the mapping document and the fact that we're going to be creating a new mapping document. So Juicy, I don't know if you want to just touch on that and our plans regarding the creation of a new mapping document.
Yes, I will try to respond quickly. So the mapping document will be revised to reflect the KSB that are now mapped to the professional discussion underpinned by the portfolio. The mapping document will contain examples of evidence that can be included and the quality of evidence. I think in scope, we will also, we have planned to provide some guidance about the portfolio with expectation on an example of evidence that can be included and the expectation around the content and details of the evidence. So hopefully it will help you. And again, the 20 pieces is not our restriction, is coming from the assessment plan directly. Hopefully both documentation will help you to select the best evidence that hopefully will cover as many KSB as possible by therefore reducing the size of the portfolio.
I think to add to that, I'd just say, you know, when you're delivering the on-programme and delivering the qualification, it's really thinking about those the descriptors, the groupings that are set within the assessment plan, and think holistically about how the qualification can be achieved, because that's mainly portfolio, and then that will help you to produce evidence that is fit for purpose for the endpoint assessment.
Great, thank you, Karen. And actually, there was one question around the project, and Karen, I don't know if you might be able to answer this one, but if an apprentice is completing their qualification, you know, past the duration of endpoint assessment, can they use the project that they produce for endpoint assessment? Can they use that project towards their diploma?
Right, I'm just sort of thinking that through. So the qualification is designed to meet the knowledge, skills and behaviours of the on programme. So if they haven't finished the qualification, have they demonstrated all of the KSBs that enables them to say that they are gateway ready? That's purely a question there, because that would suggest that the project work that they've done while on programme is very much on programme. So they would need to have a new project that they initiated post gateway. So I'm not sure how you would wrangle the two. The fact that the qualification is designed for your on programme, so there would be some gaps in your knowledge, skills and behaviours that you've developed for on programme if you hadn't completed the qualification. That's just something I'm playing with in my head. I don't know that that answers the question. That's just the musings that I've got there. I'm just conscious.
And I think what you're reflecting there, Karen, is that actually it wouldn't be best practice to do that, and the purpose of qualification is to prepare the apprentice for endpoint assessment. So trying to wrangle things wouldn't be an effective way of doing things.
It sounds messy. Joe, I'm very conscious of time. We've gone over by 3 minutes, so could we make that our last question, and we'll commit to then looking at the ones that we haven't responded to. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'll wrap it up now, so thank you. So we've got 2 more webinars coming up, and here are the details here. So next Tuesday at 9:30, or a Q&A session on the 14th, and this is how you can get in touch with us. So thank you for your attention this morning and for interacting with us throughout. It's really great to have some questions, even if they're challenging ones. It shows that you're working with us. So thanks again for your time, and look forward to working with you. Thank you now. Bye bye.